Hello, and welcome to the Garden Futures podcast from V&A Dundee. In this final episode of the series, we listen into a conversation with Arit Anderson and Dame Laura Lee as they talk through gardens, design and healthcare. Arit is a garden designer and broadcaster whose work today is influenced by her own holistic training and practice. Laura is CEO of Maggie's, the cancer support charity where light, colour and the garden play a part in making people feel welcome and in control of their well-being, offering a design-led alternative to a clinical environment. The charity is, of course, developed by and named after writer and garden designer Maggie Jencks, who, alongside her colleague and husband Charles, is featured in the Garden Futures exhibition. Although that exhibition is coming to a close on Sunday 25th of January, we're excited to be hosting a new free exhibition that follows some of the stories within this episode. Maggie's Architecture That Cares opens in our galleries on 6th of March 2026.
Gardens are not just places of beauty, but of power, and they can influence how we live, how we reflect, and how we heal. And nature's always been there for us, always given us life, and the Garden by Design aims to capture a snapshot of that. I'm Arit Anderson, a writer, garden designer and broadcaster who believes gardens are essential to our physical and mental well-being as spaces that can bring joy and comfort in our everyday life and during our toughest moments. V&A Dundee's Garden Futures exhibition explores the idea through the people who design, use and are changed by the garden. With me to discuss this further is Dame Laura Lee, CEO of Maggie's, a healthcare organisation built around the understanding that environmental design can affect our well-being. Under her direction, Maggie's has provided a space and service to over 327,000 visits from people living with cancer and their families. So Laura, hello, and so good to see you.
Hello. Lovely to be talking with you.
Yeah, it is indeed. I mean, I think it would be really good to kind of fess up, really, that we do know each other. And I'm a trustee of the National Garden Scheme and hugely proud and honoured that Maggie is one of our beneficiaries.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have the relationship with, because it's so synergistic for us.
Yeah, I mean, the whole gardens and health is the ethos of National Garden Scheme. We open gardens, we serve tea and cakes with our lovely garden owners, and all of the money that's raised is divvied out to healthcare organisations like yourself. So I guess really, Laura, for those people that don't know anything about Maggie's, I guess we should really start and talk about what Maggie's is about.
So Maggie's are places, buildings on hospital grounds adjacent to the cancer centre where most people have to go to for their cancer care. And we have professional experts working in Maggie's centres that provide psychological, emotional, practical support right from the point of diagnosis throughout their treatment, but also really importantly when treatment comes to an end and people are having to adjust to getting back to productive lives, but impacted by the change that their cancer diagnosis or treatment might have brought for them. And also when cancer comes back, supporting them and their family with that uncertain journey of being on treatment. And that's the kind of financial worries to how to tell my children, to difficulties with navigating the NHS. Maggie's is there to sort of help them with whatever their worries or concerns might be.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, as you say, it's that support, because let's face it, so many people will go into a hospital setting, be put behind a blue curtain, told the most life-changing of information, and then pop back out into the waiting room. I mean, and you guys are there.
And that's absolutely what Maggie, our founder, that was her comment was, I was told that I had 3 months to live, and then asked to sit in the corridor. And what do I do with that information? Where do I go next? And Maggie's is exactly that place where people can come to process and to work out what are the right things for them. But in a place that is hopeful and and leaves people feeling better, which I think, is where the next bit of this conversation might go about why the buildings and importantly the gardens are so important to the overall experience that people have when they come to a Maggie Centre.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely be talking about that. But I think it would be really, honourable, obviously, to talk about Maggie, for people to hear what happened in terms of how, she was a catalyst and has left this amazing, amazing legacy.
Yeah, so Maggie was someone who, her cancer had come back and came to the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh for her cancer treatment, having been told this very difficult news that she only had 3 months left to live. And it was through that period of treatment where she started to explore that the NHS was doing an amazing job of the clinical care, but the other stuff of what she could do to help herself, how to deal with all this advice and thoughts that family and friends were throwing her way, how to best navigate the uncertainty that she was facing. And so that was her idea for a place, and importantly, a place that people would leave feeling better than when they arrived. And again, that thing about the hospital environments are often that blue curtain, no views of nature, signage, everything about it leaves people feeling kind of worse rather than better. So it was her idea for the place. And we opened our first centre in Edinburgh. Unfortunately, she had died before it opened, but it was absolutely as she would have envisaged it. And then people have come on to help us build a network of centres across the UK.
Yeah, which is just, it's just
an amazing legacy.
It's an amazing legacy. And it makes me quite emotional, because I feel that so often there are people that come into the world, have to go through such trauma. We have the same sort of narrative with Horatio's gardens, and of course we're not here to talk about that. But again, a young man who had to go through, basically die and leave these legacies. But of course, the impact and the reach is just astonishing. You're international now.
Exactly, and I think she took on her own experience to help others. And that gift, and in a way, that's what we see happen every day in the centre, where people come in experiencing cancer, but then through their own experiences, through sitting by talking to someone in a support group or a course or at the kitchen table sharing a cup of tea, actually helping others. And that gift of starting something that people would then take on board. And as you say, we've got centres now also overseas who've wanted to learn from what Maggie's idea was and make that available to help their communities of people going through cancer.
Yeah. So how did you actually come to meet her?
So I was Maggie's cancer nurse in Edinburgh. So I was the person who gave her chemotherapy, and I was the person she talked to about, yep, you're doing a great job in the NHS, but you're not doing all of these other things. So she was someone who I was learning from about what we weren't able to do, and what would make an amazing and impactful difference in people's lives. And also those of us working in the hospital, the family who are also going through cancer also need support, and the hospital not looking after their particular needs. So yeah, I was very lucky to have met and known Maggie and be part of that understanding of what her vision was for Maggie's, and to be part of Maggie still today.
It's really interesting, Laura, because I used to work in hospital.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you see, we're having all these reveals. So I was, in my very first incarnation, I was a pharmacy technician.
Uh-huh.
So working at a local hospital, and then worked at the Middlesex Hospital, which is no longer. And I remember, because I was quite young, I guess sort of 19 at the time. And I always remember even then, thinking, I love the NHS, but I was like, it's also symptomatically focused. We focus on symptoms. If I've got a broken leg, you can say I've got a broken leg, but if I've got a broken head, as it were, mentally, etc., those sorts of things, that emotional side isn't there. And I just always remember that we were kind of very weighted as an organisation in that. And I've sort of, do you feel that has shifted a bit? Because obviously you've crossed tracks from, again, being within the NHS and now coming out on that more holistic side.
I think I mean, the sad honest truth, I think, because of the demands on our NHS, the hospitals have become even more efficient factories of treating the medical components that people come in with rather than the whole person. And I think the flip side of that, though, is hospitals, invite Maggies on board because they see the difference that we make. And we know that our buildings and gardens get used by staff, and because they benefit from having good outdoor spaces and good environments. And I think our nudge to the hospital, back to your early experience, is hospitals should be good places for people to work in as well. And Maggie had this line of, it should be yippee, it's my day at the hospital where I can get some of the problems that I'm dealing with answered, but leave feeling better than when I arrived. And most of us, because of the strip lights, and that isn't the case. So I think we've got to keep nudging our hospitals to do more around creating environments, not just for staff, but for the people who are using them, that they can be a positive force for good rather than just focusing on the technical thing that is done to someone.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's the holistic element of treating people, this sort of wraparound, which I know that Maggie's does. And I think, again, if I go back to when I was younger, all those lovely days, that I was a lot more into holistic therapies. And at that point, it was very much called alternative therapy.
Yes, that's right.
And really, kind of as if it was a choice. You either do alternative therapies to traditional, or medicinal, where actually, I think, which is great when we see places like Maggie's, is that they actually it's not either or. It's an integration of the two.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to sort of explain to the listener about the sort of the design ethos of the buildings, and then the garden spaces. Obviously, we talk more about the gardens as well, but just that ethos of how they come about.
Yeah, so I think, that thing of treating the whole person, isn't it? So Maggie's husband, who was an architectural critic and writer, talked about how that Maggie's are part hospital, because we're dealing with sort of some of the technical and clinical issues that people are facing, part home, because home is a place that, for most of us, most of the time, is a place where we feel safe and we can be ourselves in. That being part church, as in, obviously Maggie's are non-religious, but that spiritual person, that existential kind of component of who we are, that Maggie's should be places where we can explore our kind of essence. That part museum, that bit that stimulates our curiosity, where we can learn and be inspired. So in a way, our buildings and gardens are about kind of creating those spaces for people to kind of be whole in whatever aspect that they need to. So it's a big ask of our buildings. And I think the gardens play a really important part of that. And I think when I say buildings, I mean both of those things together. I don't mean that the gardens are something separate. It's the gardens are part of the arrival. The threshold of walking into Maggie's is really difficult. You don't know what to expect. You might have to talk about cancer. So that walking in a path, how that the gravel of the path is communicating something different to your brain, where you're looking at plants moving, this catches your eye, settles your anxiety. So you come in the door, you're welcomed by a Maggie's member of staff, not a receptionist. Who are you? What are you here for? You're taken over to a kettle. And again, at every point of Maggie's, you've got a view out to nature. So you've got somewhere for your eye to kind of go and linger. And I suppose what the gardens offer back in is this constant shifting, changing landscape, because we are shifting and changing. And so they become this opportunity to help our staff have deep and meaningful and psychological sort of conversations. And that the cycle of nature that comes through. So we're in winter, so we're indoors, but we're still looking out on a garden. And I always remember Pete Aldoff talking about, who did our garden in our Marsden Maggie's, about the beauty of plants in winter, when they're dead, when they're decaying, when they're dying. And again, how those metaphors of this, and then the hopefulness that comes with the new season and spring. So again, gardens can really sort of facilitate some of the conversations that people need to have in a Maggie's. I've rambled a bit there, but
no, not at all. Because I totally agree. I mean, the nearest one to me is in Fulham, and in London, and that one was Dan Pearson.
That's right, yeah.
And as you were talking, it is that complete description. We've got sort of Fulham Palace Road sort of skating past, and it's very, very urban, and you've got really, very noisy. And again, as you say, imagining that you're carrying this very heavy burden of treatment plans, or not knowing if you're going in for consultation. But there is such a walkway, that walk into the space, and there it's deliberately very green. It's not highly floriferous. Often people think about gardens of only being the delight of the flower.
Yeah.
Where actually there is that element of, it is the green, the physical green, which we know that colour resonates with our whole energy system and everything. But I think, yes, that experience of going into that building, and as you say, every aperture that is non-solid wall, you can see green space and openness.
And the magic is that you don't need much to change how you feel when you're inside. So you don't have to have this, huge landscape. And, Sarah Price, who did our garden for us in Southampton, which is the centre is built in a car park and it's surrounded by cars, and it's a tiny footprint. But by just mounding the garden slightly means that the full garden effect comes into the building. And that the gardens aren't dislocated from the building. And I suppose it's a bit like, why do people talk about how Maggie's, saved their lives? People use big dramatic words about how Maggie's helps them, because, we know that it was the surgery and the chemotherapy, but it's saved the kind of sense of person and self and the wholeness. And it's quite hard to sort of describe, because it starts to sound kind of mystical and magical, but it
is.
It's so kind of guttural and basic, actually.
Well, I think the reason possibly why you find it hard to describe is because it is a visceral thing. I remember when I used to sort of do healing work, like I used to do massage, but I used to do sort of hands-off healing and very non-tangible things that would be occurring between me and another person. And I always think about, healing is an adjective, it's a doing word. I think that the thing with the centre is that my experience of friends and family members who have had cancer, or have passed with cancer, is that because it's so big, it's so easy to hand over your ability to be present to a doctor. Heal me, help me, and hand that over immediately. And then by the time that you kind of have got your bearings back on, you're in the system, and you can find it it's very discombobulating, and you feel like you're being done unto. And I think that there's somewhere like Maggie's. You mentioned that word dislocate, that fragmentation that I imagine people go through, I've witnessed people go through, is that it's when I used to do, like you say, this mystical, magical work, we would be talking about holding space. Hold space for another human being is, I feel, such a huge honour, that I can stand there and make and help you feel safe while you get yourself together. And that's what Maggie's, I feel, does.
I think very much so. I think people talk about kind of three sort of core emotions of the feeling aloneness, even if you've got loving family around. And again, I think that's where, if you come into a place that makes you feel valued and that you just feel safe within, and you're seeing the movement of garden, you feel immediately less alone, and the kettle that feeling of loss of control, that discombobulated, you've handed everything over. But we know that makes people feel anxious. And so, again, small things just to gain back one sense of self-control. And hope is not that helplessness. If you can turn that into hope, even if that, and that's not about false or misleading hope, but it is hope for the moment and the now. And again, I think that's where gardens are so central to helping us feel hopeful in the moment that we happen to be in. And that is what can then nourish us and sustain us into whatever lies ahead.
Oh, just 100%. I mean, we're just so on the same page. Because I will say to somebody, and even I've literally actually, before I came onto this, I had a message from a colleague whose partner is going through very difficult cancer stages. And my last words to him with that text was just don't give up, never give up, because hope is abundant. It's the one thing that you can never run out. It is there at infinitum. And if you can tune into that hope, and like you say, it's not a false hope. It's just, I hope I get through today. I hope my family can cope with what I'm having to tell them. It's not necessarily a hope that I totally get well when unfortunately there's a prognosis and diagnosis that doesn't allow it. It's not false, but it's, as you say, it's that thing, isn't it, with gardens, plants, seeds. I hope I'm going to get it open tomorrow. The plant's going to open, the seed is going to germinate. And that playback, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah. And, hope in that context that has an honesty that actually can help people feel joyful about the moment. And that was another kind of key message that Maggie talked about, was how to not lose the joy of living and the fear of dying, or the fear of what's ahead, or the fear of the uncertainty, or how I might be changed as a result of my cancer treatment. And again, I think gardens just offer joy. When you get them right, and I think we haven't always got it right at Maggie's. I think we started off doing the gardens as a second thing from the building. You'll know it in your world where, you're doing a building and costs are running out. So you kind of like, the garden gets squeezed. And we've got so much better at the garden designer comes with the architect right at the beginning. They're a joint team. Often myself as a client, we're telling the architect they're wrong and the gardener's right about positioning of the building, light. Dan Pearson also told Norman Foster, who wanted a particular hedge, that he wasn't getting that hedge because it wasn't good. It wasn't a good hedge. He just wanted a beautiful green line, but it would have been, awful. So that designing and standing up for the value of garden design and plantmanship.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the design is the design of the garden. If you are doing it from scratch, you need the bones.
Yes.
Because the plants are going to come and cloak the bones so that all of that other hard landscape and level changes, etc., sort of disappears and melts and melds with that plant material. And I think it's because, again, I think you touched on it before, that, plants are living beings. And when you have a building, so whether a friend of mine, a lovely way of denoting between the garden and the building is like, the architects are the photographers. They have the stills. Yeah, they have the stills photography, because once it's built, it's solid. It's not going to change. And the landscape architects or the garden designer is the movie maker, because we've got a dynamic, living, moving medium that we work with that comes and goes. It flowers. It doesn't, as you said, with Pete Aldorf and Beauty and Decay. So we have to manage all of those things. And
it's true, the architect does their building and goes on to their next thing. Maggie's garden designers, they have to stay with us because of that living, changing nature. So we need them to continue to help that garden evolve, because sometimes things don't quite work out, or some things needs to change. And if you want to keep the kind of chemistry of the garden designer, yes, it's not an easy gig when you come and work for Maggie's as a garden designer. You're there for life.
You sign up and that's it, you're in. I mean, obviously obviously, Maggie's is a charity, Laura, and as you say, you've got the initial setup costs of initiating the building, of getting the garden installed. But what are the other sort of maybe silent monetary things that are needed that people wouldn't necessarily think about that to keep these centres going?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we do is supported by philanthropy, and from the National Garden Scheme to cake sales, marathons, generous sort of individuals. And so that kind of fundraise income is an amazing gift and responsibility for us. And it helps pay for the professional experts that work in our centres, but also helps us make sure that, we maintain the building and the gardens so that they can continue to look after the people who are coming in and using them. So each centre we have a gardener, and they keep that constant link with the garden designer. And then that gardener works with volunteers and then runs support groups. Our gardens are not about just mowing a lawn. So you need to continue to look after and nurture your environment. And there's no point in just putting in that investment at the beginning if you don't take care of it. And the centre that you talked about, West London, it's 17 years old, that building. But I think you were in it just recently. Doesn't it feel wonderful? It feels, the other thing is if you get that right, it ages beautifully and becomes better with age. So we're not about making something happen that is not going to last the test of time, because cancer's not going anywhere and we need our buildings to continue to work for us for many years to come.
Well, that's it. I mean, and that particular building, I know that you've got the building that's in Dundee, obviously,
yes.
And there are examples of the Maggie centres are in the Garden Futures exhibition at the V&A Dundee, so people can hopefully see some of those examples there if they can't get to a centre. But yes, the this whole long-term view, and especially as you say that, that a lot of people living with cancer, it can be that long-term, all of these sort of metaphors that are being played back through the work that you actually do, not just the detailed day-to-day of somebody coming into a centre. So I wonder, where do you think then the future of gardens and healthcare, do you think that we are, I know it's slow. I feel it's slow. I remember my 19-year-old self going, come on, what's going on? But, do you feel that there is a progress?
I think there is. And I think we've just got to continue to value our open public spaces. I think there's been a risk in society that, if you like, the beautiful spaces that were being created are in the kind of private domain of the kind of corporate world. And we need to make sure that the public spaces that people can come out to and use are also wonderful and uplifting and nourishing. And so that is about our schools, our hospitals, our parks. If they can offer something back to people, they can take that home with them and have somewhere to come to. So I think we're, look what you're doing at the National Garden Scheme, what the V&A is doing with this exhibition. It's all about continuing to celebrate, to talk about that it's not a fancy add-on extra. It's essential. And we just have to keep reminding people, to keep bringing people to experience these places. Because when people come into Maggie's, they talk about, whoa, I didn't know I was going to talk about these things. I didn't know I didn't know I was going to feel like this. And if we can share more of that, we'll get other places building in landscapes and gardens alongside buildings.
Yeah, which is I think is so key. And as you say, I think that the NHS, there are more green spaces infiltrating in. I know the RHS does work. I myself was able to do a show garden that got relocated to a mother and baby unit, for example, within an NHS setting. And when they arrive, as you say, it doesn't have to be this kind of like, full on wham bam moment. I mean, of course, you've got this wonderful model now, and it's so brilliant seeing the work that it does. But yeah, even this slither of land, I went into this mother and baby unit, and mum a prisoner would have had more space to walk around, going around this little with a buggy, very, very, distressed women that have got really bad mental ill health through their pregnancies, and literally walking around a patch of green with no other plant interest, etc. And so, of course, when this little garden arrived for them, which they wanted to have hot chocolate to be out there later in the evening, and can we order blankets, because it gave you somewhere else to go, and that's the thing about the Maggie Centre.
And it created the communication and the relationship building, and then the other health benefits that come as a result. I saw that in the Royal Free, which is a very unattractive hospital, but they just put some planting along the frontage. And even though they couldn't transform the ugliness of the hospital, your eye was taken to the nature, and that changed your feeling of the approach. And so we don't have to make it this big, difficult thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a way that people can get involved to physically help and be hands-on within a Maggie Centre?
Absolutely. We always need volunteers on all sorts of different levels. We have open days for our centres, which you helped us with the National Garden Scheme. So just, call into your nearest centre, and we would love to show you around, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, that's what's so lovely. And I think that's the thing that's so wonderful as well. This is, just to reiterate for people, isn't it? This is not just a centre for just the cancer patient. It's the friends.
Friends.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I just wonder if of all your many centres and all of your many experiences, do you have like a story of one that just touched you? Something like you said, because that little thing, even something that somebody said, or just seeing a shift for somebody. Is there one that you could share?
Oh, do you know the thing that I get told repeatedly is just the feeling of being hugged as they come in the front door. And I hear that time and time and time again. It is a combination of the member of staff approaching someone with a smile and a welcome, but it's a garden in the building, and it's that hug, metaphorical, without anyone physically touching them. And isn't that wonderful? Because we all need more hugs in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a sort of magic, isn't there, in the Maggie's face?
There is 100%, and the hug is most definitely what people want and need. So I think that, I am so proud that the organisation that I'm a trustee of is really adding value for you. What's the future looking like for Maggie's?
So the future is we're opening 3 new centres this year. So we will have 27 Maggies at the end of this year. And there are 60 cancer centres across the UK. So there's an awful lot more places for us to go to. And and I'm looking forward to hearing what the public's response is to the V&A exhibition as well. So more gardens, please.
I'm with you on that. I'm definitely like you. We'll be banging our gong outside the V&A Dundee. You know you need a garden. Oh, it's been I could carry on talking.
It's a pleasure to talk to you too.
It's been brilliant to talk to you. So I just want to close by giving obviously a huge thanks to you and everyone at the Maggie Centres. I mean, as Laura said, you can be involved even if you are not a patient. Please go and visit their website, which is maggies.org, for more information on their work. And also as well, the V&A Dundee's Garden Futures is now open until January the 2026, which is great. And just to say that this podcast has been produced by Troy Nelson as part of the V&A Dundee's public programme. You can subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes, and please visit the website to find out else we have coming up. So from me and Laura, we're going to carry on chatting, but we're going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.